He unfastened the latch. Then came another searing thought, his doctor's identity card. He searched one pocket, then another, no trace of it. Hell, of course. He had left it at home. What a disgrace. Suppose he were stopped and caught. He was wearing a gray army greatcoat. If they questioned him and he said he was a doctor, how could he prove it? Damn his own carelessness. Hurry, whispered a voice inside him. Without stopping to reflect any longer, Alexei rushed to the back of the shop by the way Malyshev had gone, through a narrow door into a dim passage, and from there out by the back door into a yard. Obedient to the voice on the telephone, Corporal Nikolka Turbin led his 28 cadets across the city by the route laid down in his order, which ended at a completely deserted crossroads. Although it was lifeless, it was extremely noisy. All around in the sky, echoing from roofs and walls, came the chatter of machine gun fire. Obviously the enemy was supposed to be here because it was the final point on their route indicated by the voice on the telephone. But so far there was no enemy to be seen and Nikolka was slightly put out. What should he do next? His cadets, a little pale but as brave as their commander, lay down in a firing line on the snowy street and Ivashin the machine gunner squatted down behind his machine gun at the curb of the sidewalk. Raising their heads, the cadets peered dutifully ahead, wondering what exactly was supposed to happen. Their leader was thinking so hard that his face grew pinched and turned slightly pale. He was worried, firstly, by the complete absence at the crossroads of what the voice on the telephone had led him to expect. Nikolka was supposed to have found here a company of the 3rd Detachment, which he was to reinforce. Of the company there was not a trace. Secondly, Nikolka was worried by the fact that now and again the rattle of machine gun fire could be heard not only ahead of him but also to his left and even, he noticed uneasily, slightly to his rear. Thirdly, he was afraid of showing fear and he constantly asked himself, "Am I afraid?" "No, I'm not," replied a brave voice in his head, and Nikolka felt so proud that he was turning out to be quite brave that he went even paler. His pride led him on to the thought that if he were killed he would be buried to the strains of a military band. It would be a simple but moving funeral, The open white silk-lined coffin would move slowly through the streets, and in the coffin would lie Corporal Turban, with a noble expression on his wax-like features. It was a pity that they didn't give medals any longer, because then he would have worn the ribbon and cross of the St. George's Cross around his neck. Old women would be standing at the cemetery gates. "Who are they burying, my dear?" "Young Corporal Turban." "Ah, the poor, handsome lad." "And the music?" "It is good to die in battle, they say." He hoped he would feel no pain. Thoughts of military funerals, bands and metal ribbons proved a slight distraction from the uncomfortable business of waiting for an enemy who obviously had no intention of obeying the voice on the telephone and had no intention of appearing. "We shall wait here," Nikolka said to his cadets, trying to make his voice sound more confident, although without much success because the whole situation was somehow vaguely wrong, and stupidly so. Where was the other company? Where was the enemy? Wasn't it odd that sounds of firing should be coming from behind them? Hash. So Nikolka and his little force waited. Suddenly, from the street that crossed theirs at the intersection, which led from Brest-Litovsk Street, came a burst of fire, and a detachment of gray-clad figures poured down the street at a furious pace. They were heading straight for Nikolka's cadets and were carrying rifles. Surrounded? Flashed through Nikolka's mind, as he tried wildly to think what order he was supposed to give, but a moment. Later he caught sight of the gold-braided shoulder straps on several of the running men and realized that they were friendly. Tall, well-built, sweating with exertion, the group of cadets from the Constantine Military Academy halted, turned around, dropped on one knee and fired 2 volleys down the street from whence they had come. Then they jumped up and ran across the intersection past Nikolka's detachment, throwing away their rifles as they went. On the way they tore off their shoulder straps, cartridge pouches and belts and threw them down on the wheel-rutted snow. As he drew level with Nikolka, one gray-coated, heavily built cadet turned his head towards Nikolka's detachment and shouted, gasping for breath. "Come on, run for it. Every man for himself." Uncertain and confused, Nikolka's cadets began to stand up. Nikolka was completely stupefied, but a moment later he pulled himself together, thinking in a flash. This is the moment to be a hero. He shouted in his piercing voice. Don't dare to stand up. Obey my orders. At the same time he was wondering numbly, what are they doing? Once over the intersection and rid of their weapons, the fleeing cadets, 20 of them, scattered down Fontany Street, some of them taking hasty refuge behind the first big gateway,